Greetings. I'm Harvey Langholz, Executive Director of the Peace Operations Training Institute, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar as part of our ongoing series in webinar topics related to peacekeeping, conflict resolution, humanitarian relief. Here at POTI, we try to bring you the latest, most current, and up-to-date information on a variety of topics. And to that end, I'm pleased to welcome today Professor Tom Woodhouse from the University of Bradford. Professor Tom Woodhouse held the Adam Curley Chair in Conflict Resolution at the University of Bradford from 1999 to 2012. He founded the Center for Conflict Resolution at the University of Bradford in 1990. He has been attached to the Department of Peace Studies since its formation in 1974, when he was appointed as a research assistant to the founding professor, Adam Curley. He retired from his post in October 2012 and currently is an emeritus professor at the University of Bradford. Of course, we know him best as the author of our course, Peacekeeping and International Conflict Resolution, and there's a recent update to that, so thank you for providing that. And he's also known worldwide for his book, Contemporary Conflict Resolution, now in its 4th edition, co-authored with Oliver Ramsbotham and Hugh Molly. So Tom, it's been my pleasure to work with you over the years. I wish you a warm welcome, and why don't you start out maybe by discussing your course in general terms, and then I have a series of questions here that students have submitted.
Okay, thanks very much, Harvey, and thanks also to your fantastic team at POTI. It's been a great pleasure also for me to work with you over the years in delivering this course. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview, as you suggested. Again, my name is Tom Woodhouse. I'm currently an emeritus professor of conflict resolution at the University of Bradford, which is in the north of England. We have a peace studies department there, and I've been working in that department teaching conflict resolution actually now for, well, upwards of 40 years, so quite a long time in working in this field. So let's say a little bit about the content of the course and really why I think it's an important topic to study. My interest in this initially came from a conviction that if we're ever going to succeed in achieving levels of security for everyone in the world, the people working in the field of UN peacekeeping and academic conflict resolution need to talk to each other. We need to share knowledge, skill, and experience. And I think for some time that wasn't happening, although thankfully it is beginning now to happen much more productively. So the course, it covers in some detail topics such as conflict trends, where do they happen, how frequently do they happen, conflict types, how can we classify them, ethnic, ideological, religious, and so on, what are the underlying theories we can use to explain them, how can we deploy conflict prevention policies to counter conflicts, and then some of the more sophisticated and complicated issues that we need to know about, like cultural awareness, cultural and gender awareness for peacekeepers coming from the field of conflict resolution, and so on. So that's the material content of the course. In this way, the course provides a knowledge base and a skill set that helps to make peacekeepers more effective in some of the big conflicts that we face today. And we know that these conflicts are hugely costly. Figures have even been put on this, that Vision of Humanity, for example, has calculated something in the order of global cost of conflict, the economy, near enough 10 trillion US dollars, a massive figure. And if somehow we could reduce this, the diverted resources that we could put into global development rather than global conflict would receive a huge boost. So that's one of the kind of moral and functional economic motivations to get this right, if you like, to connect these two fields of peacekeeping and conflict research. And that's really, as I say, what the course sets out to do. So now looking why it's not just an academic interest orientation, but I think this is now entering much more fully into UN peacekeeping, so-called doctrine or policy. And I think many of the people studying the course and others on the program generally will know that the UN in 2008 produced its new capstone doctrine in its report, United Nations Peacekeeping Operations, Principles and Guidelines. This new doctrine, which has been in high-level panels recently commented on it further, identified 3 success factors which were correlated with effective peacekeeping. And these factors were 3: legitimacy, credibility, and the promotion of national and local ownership. I think that third one in particular is massively important, and it's where conflict resolution skills, knowledge, and ideas can impact very well on the effectiveness of peacekeeping. So if we are concerned about the success of any peacekeeping mission, then we're talking about consent and acceptance, really about the legitimacy of the mission, and especially the principle of local ownership. So a large part of winning consent and gaining trust depends on promoting the basics of conflict resolution, the skills of good communication, dialogue, effective negotiation, attentive mediation, and creative problem solving. These are the core skills of conflict resolution, and they're also closely related to the so-called consent-promoting techniques, which make up the soft skills and processes of peacekeeping, as opposed to the hard or technical and military skills. And they're designed to win hearts and minds, which is another way of saying that people want to positively support, engage with the peace process and the mission mandate. So soft skills, the soft skills of conflict resolution, like the hard or technical skills of military peacekeeping, can be learned. And we hope that the course, and in fact we're confident the course, enables students and participants to learn these skills at a level which is a level of theory, but is also which they can convert by practice, and there are simulations in the course to add to the skill set which they can bring to the field as military peacekeepers. So I hope that's a fairly broad in general, but nevertheless detailed enough resume of what the course is about and why we feel it's important to study these very important connections between UN peacekeeping and international conflict resolution.
Well, thanks, Tom, for that good overview of the course. And I should point out it's a very popular course. It's in high demand. We had approximately 3,000 enrollments during 2015, last year, in the old version of the course, the newly updated version of the course, and also the French and Spanish version. So I appreciate you giving us that overview. Thanks also for pointing out the importance of soft skills in conflict prevention. Yes, it's not just military at all. It's also the soft skills, and then, of course, that's what peacekeeping and international conflict resolution is all about, those soft skills, the diplomacy, the one-on-one. Thanks also for referring to the link to Capstone Doctrine. As most of our students know, we have a separate course on Capstone Doctrine. The title of the course is Principles and Guidelines for UN Peacekeeping Operations. It's written, the course author is General Robert Gordon, the same person who drafted the original Capstone Doctrine. So thanks for mentioning that, Tom, and I refer our students to that course as well. Thanks also for reminding us and mentioning that in your course, we have included in there, you have included practice questions and simulations. These give the student the opportunity to read through the material and also simulate and think over and exactly what would they do in a situation like this and how would they apply the principles of the course. So thanks for summarizing all that. Well, let's get on with our questions now. We have many questions that have been submitted. I'm sorry, we're not going to have time to read all of them, but what I've tried to do is, in some cases, combine multiple questions where students ask similar questions. I've tried to put them together as one. So here's the first question. This is from one student, and actually I see this student is from Andrew Mayer, a longtime POTI student who wrote an excellent thesis on the use of technology and especially micro sources for energy and use on peacekeeping missions. And his thesis is available online. Andrew's also visited us here at POTI. He's an employee in the Department of Defense of the United States in Washington. But let me get on with his question. So Andrew Mayer asks, how much will the UN Secretary General's expert panel on technology and innovation help resolve conflicts? The panel presents a strong case for the tech contributing countries, or TCCs, at a par with troop contributing countries, which are TCCs, and police contributing countries, which are PCCs, and financial contributing countries. So Andrew's question is about the use of technology and help in resolving conflicts.
Well, I think first thought is thank you very much, Andrew, for presenting the question. I think it certainly, for me, it raises an issue or an area which is of primary importance. I think it's important for peacekeeping to keep not only to keep up with the field of technical change, if you like, but to if possible, to get ahead of it. And I think this area of use of technology in peacekeeping raises really very important questions. In the book I mentioned, or which you mentioned in the introduction, Harvey, the Contemporary Conflict Resolution, we actually have a whole chapter on how important it is for the field, not just of peacekeeping, but conflict resolution more broadly, to familiarize itself with the rapidity of advances in what we actually call cyber peacemaking, virtual peacemaking, the appropriation or the enhancement of the work that we do both in peacekeeping and conflict resolution by the multiplying power of information communication technology. So we talk about the beginning or the early use of unmanned, unarmed aerial vehicles, so-called peace drones. I'm not sure whether this is probably an example of what Andrew has in mind. That we know that it's being used in the DRC, used in Mali. In Mali, the European member states are contributing sophisticated intelligence gathering equipment technologically to assist the mission, and I think it's very important to continue to do this. Clearly, it's not just a matter of technology. I personally think that the multiplier impact of ICT in particular is enormously important, but the technology has also got to go along with enhancement of capacity, and it's been, I think, clearly pointed out that if an unmanned, unarmed aerial vehicle identifies a build-up of armed groups with intent to attack civilians, for example, the mission doesn't just only need to know that; it needs to be able to have the capacities to respond, and that the capacity to respond, even with enhanced technology, may well be a capacity gap. But I think that the good thing is that the UN report is at least bringing these things out into the open and causing them to be discussed more seriously. In general, I think there are a lot of incredibly useful technologies out there, and I've been looking very carefully at for example, the Shahidi platform, which is a real-time conflict tracking software, open software system that enables people to report, particularly useful in terms of logging very early warning indicators of critical build-ups of conflict, and sort of bringing that technology into the architecture of peacekeeping, I think, is immensely important.
Well, thanks for that, Tom. Yes, I agree. There are certainly technological developments that can enhance the ability of peacekeeping and conflict resolution. And in some ways, right here at POTI, we're involved with the use of technology in the distribution of training information about peacekeeping. So I think Andrew brings up a good point, and I appreciate your good answer. Here is the second question. Actually, this is a group of questions about Africa submitted by several different people. So I'm going to run together about 3 different questions here. First, Jigma Nathan, and I hope I pronounced these names properly, from Nigeria, and Nira Vrawn from Ghana ask why the peace process in Sudan is so difficult, and I wonder if the government is sabotaging the mission, noticing the failure of the UN to protect civilians in IDP, internally displaced persons camps, and fearing that all of this will have a bad effect on the credibility of the UN. And a similar question and a similar concern is submitted by Alumaid Solomon Arkwe, also of Nigeria, who asked what happens and how peace can be made when governments don't support peacekeepers. And Sese Fode of Sierra Leone asks a more general question: which factor is mainly responsible for instability in Africa, and if any, and how can it be tackled? So I realize I've run together 4 questions there, Tom, but please tell me your thoughts on those.
Sure. Thank you, Harvey, and thank you to the people from Nigeria, Ghana, and Sierra Leone who presented the questions. I think we can take them together because they really raise similar themes, similar concerns, shall we say, particularly in relation to Sudan and the issue of consent. What happens when the host government appears not to be supportive of the mission, not to have actively be delivering the consent that it initially might have indicated in the mission mandate, in the acceptance of the mission in the first place. And I think the cumulatively this can, it in fact does, severely and worryingly negatively impact on the effectiveness of the mission, to the point where not only the credibility of the mission suffers, but also the credibility of the UN. And in fact, I've recently come back from a conference in Spain, in Barcelona, where some of the NGO people had come back from IDP camps in Sudan and were extremely concerned about the failure of some of the UN contingents to protect people within the camps, who a lot of attacks by militias, where the worry was that the UN peacekeepers were either unable or disinterested in responding to these. Now, here I would say that if the mission isn't being supported by the consent of the host government, then the reality must be recognized that peacekeeping is not a substitute for politics and the peace process. And if that's the case, I think the option isn't just to withdraw, but it's certainly to reconfigure the mission, to rethink the function of being there. I think this reflects the concern about the appropriateness of the configuration of the mission to the realities of field context and field situation. And I think these questions raise certainly that question, or raise that concern in relation to Sudan. So perhaps there needs to be a rethink about the peace process and the political process that's behind it. But the UN, I think, should configure its role and its posture and its capacity, at least minimally, to protect civilians, while political consent has been renegotiated. And this means it must have a more robust force capable of protecting civilians. And if it can't do this, it will deservedly lose credibility. A lot of this does come down not just to political will, but to resource and capacity. And we've been there before. You know, we don't want to go back to those dreadful scenarios around Rwanda and Srebrenica, former Yugoslavia, which really caused a devastating collapse of confidence in UN peacekeeping. So these things need to be taken very seriously. I think you also included Sese Fode's question, didn't you, about broader concerns about instability in Africa, and how do we swallow the causes, and how do we respond to this instability, in the sense that Africa seems to be, people will often use the term, the basket case that we've given up on. And now, in responding to that, I think we can present a slightly different case, and actually a more upbeat and confident one, about some of the achievements of peacekeeping in Africa. There isn't a single causal factor of conflicts that creates this instability, I think, as Cissé puts it, in Africa. There isn't a single causal factor. We can talk about massive economic and social inequality, weak governance, corruption, and so on. They all have a part to play. But I think we should be careful not to fall for rather sensationalist headlines about failures. If we go back to the 1990s, there were challenges there that were seen to be insuperable, intractable. But I think, for example, there are case studies where the UN was very successful and where there are models that we can look back to and say, what can we learn from these? And certainly the UNISAM mission, the UNISAM mission in Sierra Leone is one such case. I've written about this. It's also in the course content, and so we should accentuate the successes of peacekeeping. Also, the Ivory Coast mission, Onioki, which I've looked at very carefully, had amazing, innovative projects and programs, actually using sport down in the communities to bind people into the support for the mission. So I think we should be talking about not only the instabilities and failures, but also the successful projects that we can learn from. And actually, if you look at long-term trends, comparing early 1990s with recent years, casualties in conflicts in Africa have gone through a dramatic decline, and at least part of that is due to the presence of effective UN peacekeeping.
Well, thanks very much, Tom, for that comprehensive answer to those 4 questions. Yes, I completely agree with you. There can be a tendency to look back at the sensational headlines of failures in Rwanda and Srebrenica and other places. But there are also the successes. It seems like the successes happen quietly. If that success is Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, and one more I'll add to the list, Mozambique, and there are plenty of others. It's just the ongoing problems that seem to draw the attention of the press. And I agree with you. The question in Darfur, one could argue it's a question of political will. One could argue it's a question of resources. But these are very difficult problems that the international community lays at the door of the United Nations. And these are very difficult to solve. So I agree the United Nations is certainly doing its best and can take credit for improvement in many places. And I hadn't noted that the casualty rate has gone down, but I'm glad you bring that up. So thanks for that good comprehensive answer. Let me go on to the third question. This is a standalone question by one student. And again, I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Jungle Tekjone of Indonesia. He asks, in a country like Nigeria where Boko Haram and other common crises are, how can real peace come out of this?
Yeah, so again, another very, very important, slightly challenging question for peacekeeping and how we take it forward. Mentions the case of Boko Haram in Nigeria, which is certainly caused a lot of concern about what we do about that kind of kidnap and basically humanitarian atrocity. How indeed can real peace come out of these kind of incidents? And it's not just the case. It's not just Boko Haram. There's emerging threats from Al-Shabaab in Kenya, Akim, Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb in Mali, which are targeting culture, communities, lifestyles, going actually directly after UN staff and peacekeepers. And there's a concern that this is, as perhaps the, let's call them nihilistic terrorist groups have been contained in Iraq and Syria, perhaps they are, then they're going to seek other power bases, and this will, North Africa and West Africa seem to be favoured hotspots for them. So I think there's a wake-up call there, which our questioner has very helpfully brought our attention to. My feeling on this, I slightly, I'm kind of taking a bit of a risk on this one. The recent report of the high-level independent panel cautioned that UN peacekeeping should stay away from counter-terrorist organizations, from counter-terrorist operations. I'm wondering about this. I mean, I think that we can't ignore that nihilistic millenarian terrorism, wherever it comes from, currently from Islamic jihadi, it has to be understood and countered, and I think UN peacekeeping has to have a role in that. I'm certainly, I don't think it should be the frontline response, but I don't think you can stand back and say we'll leave that to other actors. And for me, if I could bring to attention of the students, some very interesting work has been done by an organisation, Vision of Humanity, which produce a report annually called the Global Terrorism Index. It logs incidents of terrorism, but it also tries to formulate effective policy responses. And really what it's saying is that these episodes, these terrorist attacks, and we all now, we've been very close to home in London and Paris and Madrid, and in Mali and elsewhere, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Nigeria. We need to get a creative, innovative, effective take on them as conflict resolvers and peacekeepers. I don't think we can duck it. And for me, I think the effective way for peacekeeping to do this, the GTI report, the Global Terrorism Index report, says that the way that we counter these things is by effective military policing and intelligence, but that's not enough. It has to be doubled with sustainable political response. Now, I think peacekeeping, while not being the frontline military force to go after, if you like, the nihilistic terrorism, as I call it, can be a very creative connector between the military and the political process of winning hearts and minds. That's what peacekeeping is good at, and if you can connect its ability to do that with rolling back, which includes, I think, a military response, the attacks of jihadis on civilian communities and innocent people, then I think it's going to take. There's going to be an evolution in its capacity rather than a settling back on, if you like, a sitting on the fence, which I don't think peacekeeping can afford to do in this situation.
Well, thanks for that. Yes, this is certainly a current topic, and unfortunately a topic that's going to be with us for some time. Or put maybe, I'll oversimplify or put a little bluntly, is counterterrorism part of peacekeeping? And we can argue that from both sides all day long. No, peacekeeping narrowly defined, whether it's chapter 6.5 or chapter 7, is a different topic, or you can argue yes, terrorism, because of its disruptive effects, needs to be confronted, and there needs to be an international stand against this, and it is part of peacekeeping. So it's certainly a worthy discussion to have as we look to the future. Thank you also for mentioning the Global Terrorism Index, GTI. There's a lot there. And yes, absolutely, to fight terrorism, it's a combination of military, police, and intelligence. To have an awareness of what's going on the ground and to confront it appropriately. And it's not as simple, though, as military, police, intelligence. It also requires, as you have stated, this sustained political response, the winning of hearts and minds. And ultimately, that's really where it is in people's hearts and minds. And if large groups are disaffected, preach violence, think of violence as the way to resolve their problem, their issue, their stand, it's going to be a long and difficult fight, and somehow we have to work our way through this with hearts and minds, and I suppose that's what peacekeeping and international conflict resolution is all about. So thanks for that. Here's another question. Actually, these are two questions I put together. on the topic of arms embargoes and small arms and light weapons, SALW. Mamie Adoja Safoa of Ghana, and also from the AU-UN mission in Darfur, UNAMID. What are some of the measures that have been put in place to curb proliferation of arms in Africa, and how can insurgencies be halted in the sub-region?
Yeah, I think in some ways this goes back to, again, another very good question, which certainly makes us think or points out to the need for some creative thinking. Small arms and light weapons are they are now, as we know, the bane of these chaotic conflict zones. The easier access and availability of these weapons is a curse that we need to carefully think through. What is the role of peacekeeping and conflict resolution in effectively containing this? And I think that there are international programs of action, international initiatives, which have been indeed, which are part of the UN architecture, and that perhaps we need to focus in on an effective, practical role for UN peacekeeping in the response. I think it was in early 2000s, 2001 perhaps, the UN first recognized the need for international action on the global problem of the proliferation and misuse of small arms and light weapons. And a program of action was agreed in July 2001. And this remains the kind of primary international agreement on the control of small arms and light weapons. Now, I think peacekeeping operations need to be consistently mandated to assist host countries in the disarmament process, not just in terms of the immediate disarming of combatants as part of a peace agreement, but the continued monitoring, recording, destruction, marking and collection of small arms and light weapons, so that the flushing of these things and the trading of these weapons, which seems to be almost uninhibited, there is a control convention around it, and the initial recording, marketing, containment of the circulation of the weapons from conflict areas outwards as they spread into potentially new conflict areas is, again, it's something that the UN peacekeeping can do, but it is also a resource issue. The capacity to do that, the expertise, the person power. I think these two things need to be connected. Role of peacekeeping in mission mandate connected to this broader convention to control the spread of small arms and light weapons. Again, it seems to be, it's not exactly mission creep, but we're putting more and more tasks on peacekeepers, and if we're doing that, we have to realize A, how good they can be at doing it, but B, how much they need to be resourced, which in a sense brings me to my concluding comment, but I'll stop at that point in terms of the specific answer to that question.
Well, thanks, Tom, for your good answer to that question. Yes, small arms and light weapons, SALW, these are an ongoing problem, especially at the end of a peacekeeping mission, when there's a need for the disarmament of the combatants. And in fact, we anticipate within the next few months or later on this year having an update to our DDR course, Disarmament, Demobilization, and Reintegration, which deals with some of these same topics. Once the conflict is over, how do you disarm, how do you demobilize, and how do you reintegrate previous fighters into the peaceful society? And as I said, we've received the first few lessons in that manuscript, and we hope to have it out later this year. So thanks for that, Tom. I wish we had more time to answer all the other excellent questions that have been submitted, but let me turn it back to you, Tom, for any closing thoughts that you may have.
Thanks very much, Harvey. Just a brief closing comment. I'm always amazed. I suppose, in some senses, I'm recklessly optimistic about peacekeeping. But the more I look at it, the more I think the track record really is quite impressive. And what it tends to get, and I mentioned this in my response to the question about let's say the apparent record in Africa, which tends to get a negative press. The positive press, the good news, tends not to be so prominently highlighted, but there is good news. And what always amazes me, I mean, we've now got, what is it, 16 peacekeeping operations, 125,000 peacekeepers in the field, 122 countries thereabouts contributing to peacekeeping. And I think it's a study by Victoria Page Fortner who looked at peacekeeping and its impact, the effectiveness of peacekeeping. There are many academic studies of this kind, but they all show a dramatic reduction in the likelihood to slide back into violence where there is a properly resourced peacekeeping operation in place. Anything from a 50% to 80% reduction in the chance of a slip back into conflict. Now that, on a budget, what is it, of $80 billion currently, that is massive good value. And I think that, again in the report of the high-level panel of June last year, 2016, said that the UN has got to reaffirm not just the kind of practical politics of peacekeeping, but a vision for it. And I think it can be much more upbeat about that vision, and along with the vision, if we are going to look at effective reduction in global levels of violence, and there is evidence that peacekeeping is correlated with that. It's not just an aspiration. There is an evidence base for it. If we are to do this, then we can make a confident case that it needs more resources. That $8 billion, I think, as we're well aware, represents something like, if this figure is correct, it always amazes me that it seems to be, half of 1%. The annual peacekeeping budget represents half of 1% of total global military spending. Now, to deliver what peacekeeping does on that amount of resource is nothing short of laudable.
Yes, Tom, I'm in complete agreement with you. The amount spent on international peacekeeping, UN peacekeeping, is tiny compared to global arms expenditures, and money very, very well spent and well allocated and good value. I also agree with you with a smile about being recklessly optimistic. You put it very well. But it's a serious topic. Yes, a topic that includes not only a political view, but a vision for the future, and a reduction in global levels of violence. Absolutely. And this is what you have done through your course and your book. And of course, this is what we try to do here at POTI every day. So I'll say thank you once again, Professor Tom Woodhouse, Professor Emeritus from University of Bradford in the UK. Thank you for your time, for your expertise, for your contributions to our course. I also want to remind our viewers of our other related courses, some of which we have mentioned. We mentioned DDR, again, coming out later on this year. We mentioned Principles and Guidelines. We have several courses on implementation of UN Security Council resolutions on women, peace, and security. We have courses on mine action. We have a long list of courses. Go to our website or the URL www.peaceopstraining.org, or just Google the word peacekeeping training, and you'll find us right there. So thanks again to our guests of today, Tom Woodhouse. Thanks to our students and all those who submitted questions. For those of you who submitted questions that we did not have time to read, I invite you to put those questions on our Facebook page and engage in a dialogue there. So this conversation continue even past this webinar. So once again, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you today. I'm Harvey Langholtz, coming to you from the Peace Operations Training Institute offices in Williamsburg, Virginia, in the United States. Thank you.